Welcome to Open Min Lori to Title. Title is a daily guide in the text-based respite care home. And she works for Sandefjord municipality. It might be that she wears several hats, which she can probably tell us about when she starts talking about herself. And TINE DAHL has had great success at the place where she works. About 2 years ago. Yes. And that includes both the parents of the children who are at the Teksleåsen, which is the name of the respite care home, and the staff who work there. There's a lot. Measures such as hourly rates have taken over. And she's done a lot. But to make it happen, first and foremost, I hope you'll introduce yourself, TINE, and then we'll talk a bit more as we go about all the great things you've done.
My name is TINE DAHL, and I am originally a social educator from TINE, and I have worked in Sandefjord municipality since 2011. I have worked in a co-located residence for adults up until the spring of 2019. That's when I was asked to help build what would become a respite and short-term care facility for children and youth. And when I was asked to start here at the text phase, I was already familiar with tech solutions, both from the residence I helped start in 2011 back then. It's a residence that, in 2011, was for young adults who were establishing themselves for the first time, so several of those who moved in with us came from the planning phase, so I collaborated a bit with the planning phase for that. And I was also familiar with the planning phase because I've worked closely in the municipality and, in a way, have. Yes, there was a lot of talk about the planning phase back then, before I started, and it's no secret that it wasn't all positive. It wasn't just positive, to put it that way, so I was very curious about what I would encounter when I took over. And that there were new and different things that met me when I started, and maybe it reinforced both what I had heard, but also clarified some things. Things that I hadn't really gotten an impression of before. So yes, I took over here as the unit manager in 2019. That's how it was. One of the things I said when I took over, which was very important to me, was that if I'm going to take over a unit that isn't functioning optimally, then I can't have a huge operation right away. Before I took over, the text base was in the same department as Hemangskagen, which was adult respite care. In addition, the manager who was responsible for both the text base and Herlandskagen also had responsibility for a number of additional services, like team respite care, group respite care, and private respite care. So there was a large range of services that only had one manager. And many of the services were affected by this. And it was important to me that, in order to step in and turn around something that isn't working, I need to have time and the capacity to do everything that's needed.
I think, as I remember the whole time in the building, that you met with the parents, you held meetings with the staff. At the same time, you listened very well and took good notes. You really understood all the problems. Do you see what you started working on then? And then, the reflection I've come to is mainly about the employees who produce, do a really good job, reflect on the field, reflect on the parents, and at the same time create a good work environment. Mm, How much time did you spend to? Thanks for those problems, and also to manage to get the balance to start working. I remember it didn't take very long before we had already started. We noticed it both. I heard from the staff. I've also heard something from the parents. That they started to notice changes happening, and it happened quickly and unexpectedly. Usually, in winter school, it takes a bit longer, so tell us a little about that. Yes, it was just like you said. The first thing I did when I took over was to call all the parents to a meeting together.
And to receive the feedback that came. And after I had called everyone together for the assembly, all the parents were also offered the chance to come to a meeting with just me and them. And I think that a lot of what we talked about together was more like the broad strokes and at an overall level. But I also want to get a sense of, in a way, where the shoe pinches for each individual child, because there are very different children who receive services here. That also means there are different challenges. So I did that. I gathered information from all the parents, and then I did the same with the staff, both in group meetings and also in one-on-one conversations, to get their perspective both at a general level and also about each individual staff member. And then it was important for me to work pretty quickly. But one of the things I said was absolutely crucial as a first step was to split up the staff schedules. That was really the main feedback that came through very clearly, both from the parents and the staff, that there were too many people for the parents to relate to, and too many children and adults for the staff to deal with. The staff had positions that were split between the text base and the harbor group. So, for example, someone could be working 80% here and 50% at the whole forest area. So that meant that, for the parents, there were about 80 staff members employed at the text base horseshoe when I took over. And for the children or for the staff, there were about 40 kids and adults they had to relate to. So we almost never had. So when it came to the children's government regarding occupancy and the staff shifts, it was kind of random who they bumped into. And since I took over in May, our goal was to start a new shift schedule in August, when the new occupancy would be set for the text phase in Havagen. So we worked really hard on that, quickly, to create the new foundation among the staff, who either worked at the text phase or at the elementary schools. And then the employees had a short amount of time, but they were allowed to give input on where they wanted to work here, and they were also given a choice. Because one thing I also discovered was that I was running an operation where, if they had full annual positions because of me, I probably wasn't allowed to hire any of them, but I had 20 open weekend positions. That indicates that the employees here are working way too few weekends compared to the number of full-time positions we have and the way we operate, and it was clear that the employees were choosing to avoid the most demanding part of the work, which was the weekends. So we also made a change where employees were allowed to choose between working short shifts every fourth weekend, that is, regular 7-hour shifts every fourth weekend, or, if they preferred, working 12.5-hour shifts and not having to work every third weekend as usual. As a result, we went from having 20 of these resignations down to just 4. And that quickly had an effect when we started the new schedule, since it was the same people working every weekend. And we had reduced the staff group from 80 employees to, well, now we're down to 32 employees, including all full-time positions, night shifts, and substitutes. And I think, that's it. I don't know if you experienced it too, but many of the parents quickly said that this made a huge difference. And when we saw that, now people were working, people were present and consistent at the location all the time, it gave us the opportunity to start working on the other initiatives as well. I think the most important thing is that I quickly saw results.
That's true. And there's something else that made a difference. When employees started to be allowed to have more stable schedules, the working hours they wanted became more organized, with a structure they started to follow. I think that's something that's really important for all businesses and all companies that dream of succeeding, and that's to reduce sick leave. And you managed to do that as well. So come on, share that secret. Is it just that the employees were satisfied, or is there more to it?
There are probably several things, but I think it's that they got a workplace to be at. They got to do what they wanted, meaning they could work with the same children and were allowed to provide good services. They experienced having the same colleagues. It wasn't random who was working together, and they felt that every time they came to work, it was pretty much the same people consistently all the time. And then, as you mentioned, at the same time as you had created the new shift schedule and made a new plan, we started completely from scratch with the systems. We considered all the existing systems as gone, and then we rebuilt each system one by one. Some of them ended up almost identical to how they were before, but it was important to me that we went through all the routines and systems so that they would actually have a purpose. We should only have a system in place if it needs to be there, and if so, they have to be connected, and people need to feel a sense of ownership over them, and understanding why. Why does this routine exist? Some routines and systems were completely new. We just changed them and turned them into something else. We thought about what would be more practical, and then we rebuilt everything from scratch. And we worked very purposefully with the environment. We had everything from social units to a strong focus on professional development, meaning we met and talked about the children and about our field. And I think that's one of the most important things of all, which rarely happens and is kind of used a bit here and there. I was allowed to just sit down, because when I started at Teksleåsen, I had this idea I used. I said, I need to meet the entire operations council, so I was there a bit in the evening, being present and understanding things. But I also came early in the morning before the night shift left, and then I stayed until the joint shifts arrived so that I could meet everyone who was working that day. That way, I got to meet everyone, and that was my experience. It was that morning situation when all the kids who are on the phone need to get ready to go to school and kindergarten. It was extremely chaotic, everyone just rushing around, and I sat there thinking, but why are you running? What am I not seeing that needs to be done? I just couldn't understand what they were running for. And eventually, I started to understand what was going on with them. They were so focused on making sure I saw that they were working, that it had to look like we were working, but I can see that you're working, even if you're not running around. So we worked a lot on giving praise, improving communication, and creating better structure. And then I introduced, after all the kids had left in the morning, a regular meeting where we would sit down and evaluate things, like, what did we do well? What worked? What do we need to change? And then we'd have coffee and just talk. So it's really about just feeling seen and taken care of. And I also think, for me, it was about more than just seeing them. I needed to really understand what they were doing. I would go into each child's room to get to know the kids and the staff. What are the challenges here? To get a sense of what they were dealing with. I would stay behind and clean up after them when they were done eating, tidying up after the meal, not because I love cleaning, but because I see myself as part of this too. So for me, just sitting in the office and watching them work wasn't enough. I think that what I need to do is help out and show that this is where we're going to succeed. It's not something you're supposed to do while I just tell you what to do. This is something we're going to do together, and we work very purposefully to create that kind of feeling. It's about all of us.